How are you feeling? Good? Stressed? Tired? Alright, so everything is beautiful and nothing hurts because of the situation we are in right now. So many things have happened in the last few weeks here, especially in the UK. Our political system has broken apart. Our sort of systemic, there's been a systemic breakdown of everything we really literally believed in, and we still carry on as if everything is beautiful and nothing hurts. So this is a kind of a slightly personal thing, something that we are thinking a lot about personally, but also in the studio, about actually how can we design a revolution. I'm not sure if that's even possible, but anyway. Park that. I also want to quickly introduce my partner in crime, husband and co-founder of Superflux, John, who hates public speaking, but is very much involved in everything we do and the way we think. So just a shout out to John. Alright, so this is just a glimpse of some of our projects. Our studio practice is very interdisciplinary, where we use aspects of what you call speculative and critical design, but as well as interaction and product design to work across commercial, cultural and public sector organizations. We have worked for a lot of large companies like Nokia, Samsung, Sony, but also continuously led self-initiated research funded by the likes of Arts Council and shown at various museums and cultural sectors. So I think in our work what we do is we try and use design methods to investigate, imagine, build and communicate ways in which emerging technologies influence and shape our lived realities today and in the near future by producing tangible, sort of experiential and provocative visions. We are less interested in gadgets and more interested in how design shapes culture. And so similarly, we're not interested so much in applications, although we do design applications. We also simultaneously are interested in understanding the implications of those applications, which moves us away from trying to design this perfect object and more towards things that work with the precarity of our times. So yes, embracing uncertainty and thinking of possible futures rather than one future is very much a part of our work. So this is just a tiny illustration of my newsfeed. Chaotic, too much, all at once, accelerated, unprecedented, rapid change in technology, but also chaos, sort of political unrest, a whole load of different things happening together all at once at the same time, a sense of the extreme present. And so how do you make sense of this? I think that if the future will be anything like the present, it will be as messy, complex and turbulent. But somehow the visions that we see of the future always seem to be really shiny and in different shades of blue. The computer render stands as the humble artifact of this relentless promise generation machine that constantly produces seductive images of clean blue futures, from space exploration to our cities to the interfaces we use, seamless connectivity. But we know that we know that this is a construct, this is a fiction, and even though we are aware of it, we somehow seem to get bought into this. And so I think there are many ways we could talk about speculative and critical design in our practice, but I've chosen to approach it from the lens of technology simply because a lot of our projects often are with technology companies or around specific emerging technology, but we use that lens of the technology to start unpacking some of the social, cultural, and political implications of the worlds in which these technologies operate. And so I want to go beneath the sort of big trends like big data and Internet of Things and smart cities and AI and robotics and start to see how all of these things actually bleed into one another. And I'm going to start by showing some very simple mundane things like this, Amazon. I use it a lot. I'm guilty of using Amazon a lot. When I had a newborn baby, I signed up from Prime and I would be frantically ordering nappies on Amazon Prime at 12 midnight, and they'll arrive on my doorstep in the morning. Amazing. And of course, then I start getting offered the combos. You can get wet wipes, and you can get pacifiers, and then the promise of sleep, the books that promise sleep, so on and so forth. And I was completely hooked. And so, we become enveloped in this kind of habit-forming feedback loops, thanks to the convenience of it all. The fingerprint login, the one-click buy button, save credit details, and the system of cue, routine, reward, in which the brain converts a sequence of actions into an automatic routine is called chunking by researchers at MIT. A simple example is driving a car. When you first learn to drive, tremendous concentration is required and the brain is highly active. But after much repetition, much of the act of driving becomes chunked into a subroutine and is executed with far less brain activity. And so we just kind of seamlessly, constantly, we become programmed to behave like this kind of click, 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 buy, 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 without thinking that much. And these habit-forming activities is what I call makes us what I call chunkers, a new 24/7 labor class of data-producing workers. And giant computer servers accumulate the data and metadata of all our most mundane everyday presents and pasts. And in a sense, what's happening is that we are generating data that is creating a historical universe, which then finds new ways of giving back to us what we liked yesterday. So our data is constantly aligned with variations. And stuff like this, more and more you see this is nothing, this is Siri, it's pretty crap, Apple's AI, there are Amazon's Echo's far better, you can go on. And that's because Apple's data collection policy is still fairly tight compared to Amazon. But the fact that when you ask your phone about the smart agent on your phone about where the closest bridge to you, it decides that you're going to commit suicide or you have depression issues and start spamming you with antidepressant and addiction help spam. And so the thing is that whilst there's a lot of work that we are doing, a lot of stuff that you see around in terms of technology, a lot about AI, artificial intelligence, robotics, the question is how are we progressing or regressing human agency? How much are we buying into this stuff? How much of it is actually down to us questioning what we're doing? And what are the tools that we have to even start questioning these things? This kind of sentience, this kind of AI is bleeding into our physical infrastructures through the Internet of Things. So instead of buying stuff online, things all around you start keeping track of you, so long as you keep feeding them data. Everything in our homes that we could quite well use before now requires a phone, an app, and of course your hand. Drinking water, warming milk, flushing the toilet, talking to the air freshener, and so on. This kind of cue, routine, reward system, when it starts bleeding into the physical infrastructure, you suddenly really need to start thinking about where your human agency goes. This is not true, but it could well be true. This is just an example of a thing, everyone in the tech world is like, wow, Echo, the sort of API that Amazon has built of the Echo technology is supposed to be, taking over and all that kind of stuff. But when you have a machine with whom you treat not just as a device to give you information, but also as emotional support, then it becomes a new front for war amongst tech companies. And the failure to anticipate the lived realities of such technologies can lead to embarrassing press releases like this one. Just very last year, a project. So some of these things are things that we think about a lot, and obviously we think about them not just as designers, but also as people who are interested in understanding what tools we can design to enable people to get better agency. So a small project we did, 3-week project called Uninvited Guests.
Has anyone seen that one before? Has anyone ever seen this project before?
I think I've seen this.
I'll show you a small clip.
No one knows back home what the hell I'm trying to get at when I'm talking about critical and speculative design. I always show them this first, and then they start to get it.
Okay, that's good. It's interesting that this project actually we did it very quickly and out of guilt, because we were supposed to give some scenarios but really felt like we had delayed the project because of other things and made a film. And actually less designers but more health professionals and nurses and some people from the NHS have got in touch saying, we want to think through this in a bit more depth. So for those of you who don't know about it, the idea is there's a very simple scenario about 70-year-old Thomas who lives on his own, but because he's not keeping that well, his 3 adult children send him 3 smart devices that will help them get better data about their dad, so they can remotely track him. So a smart fork to monitor his diet, a smart cane to monitor his exercise, and a smart mattress to monitor his sleep. But finding the constant nudges of the devices intrusive, Thomas stopped using them, only to be nagged by his children that, what are you doing, we're not getting your data, how you stop using the fork. So he decides to find ways to outsmart his devices, and I'm going to just show you a small clip.
Here's the general synopsis at 0700 GMT. Cow in sea area Shannon moving slowly eastwards and filling. Sorry, that should be low in sea area Shannon. And now the area reports. Viking, northward Sierra, southward Sierra, rain at times, good. Westerly becoming cyclonic, good. Humber, Thames, Bedford, Leyland, Daff, Dover, Seoul, Haight, rain at times, good. White, Portland, Plymouth.
Now, subway systems from around the world. Will you either tell us in which city your systems, please? Best of luck.
Okay, let's reveal our 5 subway systems, and here they come. We have got that made you think Paris. New York City from Andy and Julian. 50. David and Rachel are going to say. Is it going to be 15 though? It does do that. 7. Very well done indeed.
To be honest, I could make this at so many films and what have you, isn't it? Now, A is London.
Shink of light getting inside the telescope. The astronauts had to get the latch to lock.
Houston, if you copy, Jeff's just working, putting the doors back together and thinks he seems to close the gap. And we're going to press on. If you've got a way to do it, do it.
Trap and a ratchet. Floating Story Musgrave improvised a solution. It was a success. The astronauts were elated.
So the idea that, the simplistic understanding of people and this one-size-fits-all devices, especially within the world of Internet of Things, that are being considered to sort of take care of our health so that we can self-diagnose is naive and comes from a very technological high point without actually understanding that people are complex and people are not just going to accept any technology or any device you give them and use them. So technology is always, the underlying thing is that technology is always envisioned to do one thing, but it always has unintended side effects. We often overlook the more problematic aspects of technology because we imbue them with the ideals of the people who have created it and the messages of those who market it. However, creators and marketeers only ever set the affordances and suggest a use case. A technology's true impact will always be defined by those who use it, and those who use it are not these people running in the Bay Area, a jogger with this phone and this Fitbit. It's just one very tiny use case, and which is why it was really surprising and slightly frustrating for me to see this in the New York Times, that, oh my God, the 21st century migrants, essentials, the smartphones. These are people who come from Syria, which is a very well-off country. And the idea that you get a very cheap, smartphones are quite cheap now. And so the assumption that how could quote-unquote migrants have smartphones is already a problematic assumption. And on the other side, that same very technology is being ingeniously exploited by oppressive forces. So soldiers at government checkpoints as well as Islamic State checkpoints commonly demand Facebook passwords. They look at Facebook profiles to determine one's allegiance in the war. So this was not the intention of Facebook, you could arguably say. And yet today, it's been used in these ways, and yet today, Facebook does not take a stance on this. And just like that, things can be turned off. So last year, the government of India turned off internet in my home state of Gujarat for 63 million people because because they thought that WhatsApp was inciting communal hatred and violence. And this was a very stark reminder of the fact of where power lies and how quickly something that we come to rely on can be taken away from us. And so for instance, you know, in our cities, we see another example of this kind of technology. Where power lies is Uber. It's a technology company, but it's a transport company, or is it? It does not adhere to the same rules as transport companies are required to adhere. So this is a headline about Uber in China, where they collect GPS data about drivers. So, you know, if your driver is caught near any protest, they will take away that driver's ability to be an Uber driver anymore. So your political affinity is very tightly linked to your movements, is very tightly linked to the technologies you use. And this was recently an article that did the rounds about how then technology starts has biases embedded in it, so it is not neutral, which I'm sure a lot of people told you last week. So predictive algorithms become amplifiers of our prejudices. In the US, a lot of predictive analysis and predictive policing is used to gather information about people who are likely to commit a crime before they will. And well, this article by Julia and Jeff Larson and Surya Mattu and many others in ProPublica is worth a read about how these algorithms actually are so biased by those who have designed them. And so we come a full circle. From our bodies, homes to our cities, information technologies begin to form this kind of foundational infrastructure layer, often without our awareness. From a simple act of shopping, like I was doing on Amazon, and sharing insignificant details of our lives, to future crime prediction. They are increasingly autonomous systems are constantly watching, tracking, logging, collecting, and archiving every aspect of our lives. And so, how do you remain anonymous? Can you ever get lost again? What does it mean for our metadata to be stored in giant servers, such as this one? This is, I think, the Facebook server. You know, in a way, these grey boring blocks represent what you could call data colonialism. So, unlike land ownership in the past, those who own our data and the networks are the new colonialists. You know, our futures are built upon these archives. And so, it's kind of this is just one lens through which you can look at the current conditions. You could go through various different lenses, but we're curious about this one. You know, how do we make sense of it? What are these conditions? What do these conditions mean for us? How do they affect us? How can we begin to fully engage with such dramatic shifts? And how do we design for a complex and contradictory world? And I think I'm assuming that a lot of you are recent graduates of design or related fields and are interested in, have invested this time to be here because you want to start thinking of strategies and how you could continue to function as practitioners and designers in this world, but also create strategies to sort of infiltrate or penetrate this complex world. And obviously, even though actually in our practice we never say we are speculative designers, we don't want to be labeled or create territories around this discipline. The question is, what role does speculative design play? You know, can it even play a role? Are we these people who just sit and think of concepts, or do we have any power to actually affect any kind of change? And by change I don't mean immediate change, but conceptual change, show new ways of thinking. I think about this a lot right now because a lot of my friends went to the EU referendum march last weekend, and current conditions in the UK and otherwise have made us think a lot about. At the minute, in some ways, I feel quite powerless. Like, I don't feel I have the kind of tools or mechanisms to affect change. But I would like to think about it, and we can think about it together. So I think one way to think about it is this amazing quote by Lebbeus Woods, who I deeply respected and still respect as an architect and thinker, you know, who says that actually the avant-garde, these extreme cases are the avant-garde of a new normality that we must engage with creatively now. So we can engage with creative, we can create new languages, new methods, new ways in which we start kind of preserving what is essential to humanity, compassion, reason, independence of thought and action. So obviously, this is moving into a space where it's just, in our own practice, we're just starting to think of ways in which how we might do this. For now, I'm going to show you some of the projects we've recently done from kind of so there are many different kinds of projects that we've worked on, but I've kind of taken a slice of thematically 3 different projects that might show some of our work. So I think the first project is around drones, which we did for about a year and a half ago. So a drone can be a weapon, a toy. You know, it's a business, it's a source of empowerment. It's a symbol, it's an icon that represents many different sort of modes of activity and ideologies. So what we felt is that there's a lot of focus on the drone as the object, but very little thinking about what does it mean to have a semi-autonomous or even probably a fully autonomous object flying in the sky above our heads and having that unique vantage point. And so our project was we were very interested in understanding how does algorithmic intelligence affect us when it has a unique vantage point physically in the sky above our heads. We think it becomes an instrument of tremendous power as it collects data from these unique vantage points and acts upon the power afforded by that data. And so some of the questions that we were asking were quite broad, like you might start doing with your projects right now, that, you know, how do we design new interactions and relationships with increasingly intelligent technologies? Also, what are the social, cultural, environmental, political implications of living with such technologies? So, yeah, the project was called Drone Avery, and I think this is something that we are very aware of and practice a lot in our studios, that we have a sort of almost a two-pronged approach to our work. So on one hand, we are constantly doing horizon scanning, foresight, looking at trends, drivers, and mapping numerous presents and futures and past, so temporal mapping. But at the same time, we look at specific points in those maps and zoom right in and start getting more grounded. So we are doing a lot of prototyping, doing a lot of what you might call jugaad, so quickly hacking together artifacts and prototypes. We are doing a lot of ethnographic and anthropological understandings and observations of ground level realities of people and environments that might exist in this world. So there's a constant kind of oscillation between horizon scanning and making and prototyping and understanding the materiality of things and technologies. And so this is just a glimpse from the studio where we started building drones. And you know, this whole kind of myth of these drones and they'll fly is crap. It doesn't fly. It defies gravity. It's very difficult to fly a drone. And to get an understanding of that is as important as the ability to be able to understand. Is important in order to understand its implications. So we built about 5 different drones, gave them identities based on our horizon scans, the kind of trends around drones and their uses, and then we flew them. And each drone's micro-narrative is a plausible sketch of how drones might inflect social interactions and culture while buzzing around the cityscape. So this is an advertising drone. It had these massive screens on it, and it was doing facial recognition. And it was catering adverts on its screens based on what you had liked, either on your Facebook or what have you. This was a surveillance drone used by local councils. It was basically a very simple kind of tiny drone that they're already trialing in many places to see if you can collect fines from people for petty crimes. I mean, I talk about drones with a lot of hesitation because just over the last few days we saw the robotic police drone incident in Dallas and the consequences of that, and there's lots of questions. This was a newsbreaker drone. We called what it did high frequency journalism, in a sense that we imagined a lot of these drones are perched around and they gather information from intercepting audio, web and radio traffic. And then as soon as they hear about an event, they shoot there and provide you real-time news as it happens, so to speak. This is Route Hawk. It was a traffic management assistant and it fulfills two primary functions. It's high brightness displays whatever, well, pull over or stop or whatever, and giving dynamic warnings, so to speak. And then this finally, it was Flycam Instadrone. Is a low-cost, user-friendly platform with true sort of smart style functionality. In a sense, we imagine this to be superseding the selfie stick as today's must-have live logging social media tool. Obviously, this was done about a year and a half ago, and you do have these drones all around now. So much for thinking ahead. And then what we were really interested in is this how this physical and digital will mix. So something about the geofencing that, actually the most interesting things for us in terms of drones are things that you can't see. So, what happens when people will create geofences around areas they do not want drones to enter? What happens when you buy a drone and companies will update its firmware and software to stop you from flying it in certain places? So what happens when you buy a technology and you invest in a certain ideology or a certain idea and it changes over time? When we talk about civil space, we talk about it as a physical entity, this is civic space. We rarely talk about the space above our heads, partly because there's a sort of belief that till a certain level, this is common space, this is public space. But at the moment, as I speak, there's a war going on for between 90 to 400 feet, which is this area before aeroplanes fly. And this is an area that drone companies want to grab and commandeer in a way. So you are left with below 90 feet. I just feel claustrophobic. I don't know. It just does not feel like what are these digital infrastructures going to be? And so we started creating a speculative map to show this is not so much, oh look, you must have zones, and you must. It was fairly mathematically done. We collected a lot of data from the FAA and CAA. But the intention is to say when we talk about drones, we have to understand the infrastructures that we need to build in order for these drones to fly. So nothing exists on its own. There's a systemic effect for everything that you build. Should I show you the film?
Yeah.
Okay.
Program of mass surveillance, and there is no surveillance state.
This project, so this film was just one instance of the project where we wanted to show how the drones see the world, how the drones might see the city of London in quite mundane ways, essentially 5 drones flying through the city. The drone models in themselves were also built, and so the idea being that some of the things that we were thinking about were brought to life through various different mediums. We're not really restricted by you want to produce an installation or an object or a film or a series of texts. We also produced a sort of quote-unquote magazine, which is a poster. On one side you have the drone map, on the other side Tim Mon wrote short fictions around 10 different drones, 5 of our drones and 5 other drones. And we then were invited to do workshops with students. A couple of them we've done at Goldsmiths, and also for a group, a youth group who wanted to get 15 to 17-year-olds to start thinking critically through these technologies. So for us, I think, and then, so I think I'm trying to get at, you do these projects and you show them in shows, and then what happens? It's the big question that is often asked in critical and speculative designs. Well, the thing is, a lot happens. And it's not going to happen immediately, it happens over time. So this film has been acquired, but it's continuing to be shown for the next 5 years across various parts of Europe and America. We are part of a consultation group with the Royal Society, working with policymakers to understand what are the trust and ethics, how do you design trust and ethics into autonomous systems. The other part is educational, is how do you educate not just young people, but all people to better understand the inner workings of such technologies. And I think that's only a tiny drop, not to say that we're doing a lot, but I think it's making us realize that there are ways in which we can disseminate what we learned from the project and make it more public. I'm going to actually skip through this project because it just goes on. I'm just going to very quickly show you one other project that we can talk is sometimes, as I was saying, we are interested in also creating tactics rather than tactics and tools to make stuff more legible. And this was a project called Open Informant. So you know about these you know about the fact that NSA and GCHQ and many other agencies around the world are constantly keeping an eye on people, surveillance capitalism, and so on. And so these are some of the keywords that the NSA and GCHQ use. They're called the trigger words. That if any of these words are used in your personal communication, they'll be triggered, and then all your personal communication will be stored on their servers. So it was interesting is that, again, like what's happened in Brexit and what's happening in so many other things, there seems to be a sense of disconnect between the scale and seriousness of the problem and the scale and seriousness of the response. Even though people are angry and frustrated, we often find we don't have the right tools or mechanisms or agency to do something about it at an individual level quite often, and we don't know what. And the thing is that such narratives make it even more difficult to do something about it, because they're always masked under an emotive narrative of safety. So nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. Classic William Hague statement. They sort of act to control the narrative around surveillance and close down public debate on the complexities of the issue. We did again, I'm showing you short projects only because you've got short time. Well, Rose wasn't a short project, but this is a short project. It was basically done in a week. It was called Open Informant. It was a wearable, and the idea was we wanted to confront this narrative around mass surveillance. So it's a phone app and an e-ink badge that searches your communications for these kind of NSA trigger words, and then sends the text fragments containing those words to the badge for public display. In a sense, the idea is that what is taken from us by stealth, if we start publicly broadcasting it, are we shifting the paradigm of surveillance completely? In a sense, also questioning the idea of a wearable being less about our bodies, but more about using our bodies as an active symbol for protest. On a very different tangent, this project, our activated citizen agencies, so sometimes we do build real things for the real world and have real uses, as some people like to tell us. So this is a project called Buggy Air, in which for us, we've been over the years looking at climate change. We've just started a project around climate change, and this one specifically around air quality, poor air quality, which is a result of systemic climate change, bad policies versus complete freedom for companies to do what they want. So air pollution is a big issue, and there are many ways that you can address it. But currently in the UK and many other places, they put these very large air pollution monitoring devices, which are quite often at a height and expensive. So they do not actually measure personal exposure to air pollution as we move around the city, but static points, and that's very different from personal exposure. And so we built a very practical device using very accurate GPS-enabled devices, sensors. The problem with current sort of citizen science projects is that the sensors they use are often not accurate. And if you have a 50%, if you have a sensor with 50% accuracy, then actually you're doing more harm than good, because people panic when they shouldn't, and so on. And so that was quite important for us. We've been distributing these sensor kits to parents and carers to attach on prams, because we found that actually most of this air pollution settles on the ground at a height where toddlers and infants live in our cities, and they face the worst consequences of this air pollution because it affects long-term well-being and health, and we are seeing that a lot of rise in cases of respiratory diseases, asthma, and so on. And so we've trialed them for a year now with 40 parents and carers. We're collating the data, and the next step is to how do we make this data visible, and not just visible, but also give people a chance to act upon it. So if they want to send it to their council or to the legislator or to the MP, how can they do it, and how can those whom the data has been sent to take notice of it and do something about it? So how do we create these tools? And so I think, just to conclude, that some of the time that we spend in our work is about actually making, but I think there's a lot to be said about self-reflexivity in our work to trigger the critical reflection on what we actually want to do. So having a self-reflexive practice, to be constantly thinking about it. I'm very interested in using tools of self-activism increasingly to move past sort of political and other sort of structures of power and enter new spaces of engagement, and develop what we call deeper cultural consciousness that makes us more aware and even more sensitive to various cultures and contexts. And ultimately, our ambition is to then move away from the current sort of audiences that we have, to generate constantly new audiences, new people to talk to about this thing and to share our thinking. So that's us. Thank you.